Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a tale so ancient and slippery, it's practically dripping with history. Why Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, invented olive oil and immediately wished she hadn't. Picture yourself on a craggy hillside in ancient Greece, the sun baking the earth, the air thick with the scent of wild thyme and dusty stone. You're standing under a gnarled olive tree, its silver-green leaves flickering in the breeze, and you can almost feel the weight of a goddess's big idea about to change everything. Fair warning, you might not survive the sheer absurdity of what mortals do with her gift. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're high on Mount Olympus, or at least you're imagining it, your bare feet brushing against clouds that feel like cool, damp cotton. The air hums with divine energy, and there's Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and apparently questionable impulses, pacing in her marble temple. Her owl perches nearby, blinking at you like you're intruding on a cosmic TED Talk. Athena's got this glint in her eye, the kind you get when you're about to invent something world-changing or burn your kitchen down trying. She's muttering about mortals, those scrappy, sunburned Greeks down below who keep praying for something to make their lives less miserable. You can almost hear their pleas drifting up. Athena, give us a break, we're tired of eating plain barley mash. She stops pacing, her golden spear glinting in the eternal sunlight, and you catch her eureka moment. Olive oil, she says, like it's the answer to every mortal problem from dry skin to bad cooking. You're skeptical, right? I mean, oil from a fruit sounds like a stretch, but Athena's all in. She's picturing lush groves, gleaming jars of liquid gold, mortals singing her praises. Spoiler, she's about to be so wrong. You watch her kneel beside a scrappy olive tree she's conjured from thin air, its roots curling into the ethereal soil. With a wave of her hand, she blesses it, and you swear the tree shivers, like it knows it's about to cause chaos. Here's a fact to anchor you. Olive trees were domesticated in the eastern Mediterranean around 6000 BC, long before Athena's mythical meddling, but the Greeks credited her with gifting them the tree. They weren't wrong to big it up. Olive oil became their economy's backbone, used for everything from cooking to lamp fuel. But there's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient texts claim Athena invented the olive tree to one-up Poseidon in a contest for Athens' patronage, beating his salty spring with her fruitful tree. You're smirking, aren't you? A goddess playing divine one-upmanship with a plant? Classic. You're still with Athena, and she's deep in her vision now, imagining mortals pressing olives into shimmering oil. You can almost smell it, earthy, peppery, like a warm kitchen after a long day. She's thinking this is her legacy, her big win. But historians still argue whether the olive spread was divine inspiration or just clever farmers figuring out what grew well in rocky soil. You're not sure either, but you're rooting for Athena to pull this off, even if you can feel the regret creeping in. She sends her blessed tree down to the mortal world, and you follow its descent, the clouds parting to reveal a sun-scorched plain near Athens. A farmer, all leathery skin and squinting eyes, stares at this random tree like it's an alien artifact. You want to whisper, "Buddy, just roll with it," but he's already poking the olives with a stick. The farmer's not alone for long. Word spreads, and soon you're surrounded by curious villagers, their tunics stained with sweat and hope. They're poking, sniffing, and arguing about what to do with these weird green fruits. One guy, let's call him Costas, takes a bold bite and immediately spits it out, gagging like he's been poisoned. You're trying not to laugh, but come on, raw olives are bitter as regret. Athena's watching from above, and you catch a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Did she just curse these people with a prank tree? You're wondering the same thing, but Costas, undeterred, starts smashing the olives with a rock, and a trickle of oil oozes out, catching the sunlight like liquid amber. You're hooked now, watching this accidental genius at work. Costas and his crew figure out pressing, and soon they've got a clay jar of oil that smells like victory. They're slathering it on bread, rubbing it into their sunburns, and, here's the weird part, pouring it on their hair like it's ancient conditioner. You're cringing, but they're thrilled. Athena's beaming, or at least she's trying to, but you can tell she's nervous. What if they love it too much? What if they ruin it? You're about to find out, because down in the village, things are getting greasy fast. Let's pause for a quick joke. Why did the olive tree go to therapy? It had too many pressing relationships. Okay, back to the story. You're noticing the villagers' excitement spreading like wildfire. They're calling the oil Athena's gift, and you can feel the goddess's ego inflating. But there's a problem brewing, and you're the first to spot it. Some kids using the oil to slick up a wrestling match, and now two guys are sliding around like human eels, crashing into a pottery stall. The crowd's laughing, but Athena's not. You're starting to see her vision slip. Her perfect gift is already a mess. By now, the sun's dipping low, painting the hills gold, and you're exhausted just watching these mortals experiment. You're tempted to flop onto the grass and nap, but the story's just beginning. Athena's olive oil is about to take Greece by storm, and you're along for the ride, whether you're ready or not. The farmer's jars are multiplying, and whispers of this miracle oil are spreading beyond the village. You're wondering how it'll all go wrong, and trust me, it will. For now, you're stuck in this moment, the air warm and heavy, the future shimmering like that first jar of oil in the fading light. You're still reeling from the villagers' chaotic first taste of olive oil, the air around you thick with the scent of crushed olives and mortal ambition. The sun's gone down now, and you're perched on a rocky outcrop overlooking Mount Olympus, where the gods are about to have their own opinions on Athena's shiny new invention. The night sky glitters like a spilled jewelry box, and you can feel the divine drama brewing. Up here, the air's crisp, almost electric, and you're practically eavesdropping on a celestial group chat gone wrong. Athena's olive oil is the hot topic, and let's just say the gods aren't exactly sending her congratulatory ambrosia baskets. You spot Athena in her temple, her usual cool-headed vibe fraying at the edges. She's pacing again, her sandals slapping the marble floor, while her owl hoots like it's trying to calm her down. You're close enough to catch her muttering about ungrateful siblings and misunderstood genius. The other gods, lounging on their thrones or sprawled across clouds, are already poking holes in her big idea. Zeus, all thunderous beard and questionable parenting skills, is the first to weigh in. You hear his voice boom across the mountaintop, something about how mortals will muck it all up as usual. You're nodding along, remembering that kid from the village who turned a wrestling match into a pottery-smashing disaster. Then there's Poseidon, Athena's old rival, who's still salty, pun intended, about losing Athens to her olive tree stunt. You catch him leaning against a pillar, trident in hand, smirking like he's already plotting revenge. Oil? Really? He sneers, loud enough for you to hear. What's next, Athena? Teaching them to fry fish? You stifle a laugh because, okay, he's got a point, but you're also wondering if he's just jealous. Fun fact, ancient Greek texts, like those in the Homeric hymns, often depict Poseidon as a sore loser, especially after Athena's olive tree beat his spring in their divine contest. You're starting to see why he's not over it. The real chaos kicks off when Dionysus stumbles into the scene, a goblet of wine sloshing in his hand. He's all about excess, and you can tell he's intrigued by this oil thing, but not in a good way. You gave them liquid gold? He slurs, eyes glinting. They'll be bathing in it by next week. You're cringing, picturing the villagers doing exactly that, and Athena's face says she's picturing it too. She tries to defend her invention, her voice sharp but shaky, explaining how olive oil will bring prosperity, health, even peace. You're not buying it, and neither are the gods. Hera, adjusting her peacock feather crown, mutters something about mortals using it for vain nonsense, and you're already imagining ancient influencers slathering it on for glowing skin. Here's a mainstream historical nugget. Olive oil was so central to ancient Greek culture that it was used as a prize in the Panathenaic Games, with winners getting amphorae filled with the stuff, sometimes worth more than gold. But there's a quirky tidbit floating around. Some myths suggest Apollo mocked Athena's invention, claiming his laurel wreaths were classier than her greasy fruit juice. You're chuckling, right? The idea of Apollo throwing shade over a tree is peak divine pettiness. Historians still argue whether the gods' rivalries in these stories were just poetic flair or a reflection of real tensions in Greek city-states, where different deities had their own fan clubs. You're leaning toward poets having too much fun, but it's hard to say. You're still hovering near Athena's temple, the marble cool under your fingertips, when the argument gets heated. Ares, the war god, of all people, pipes up, and you're bracing for something dumb. Oil's flammable, he says, grinning like he's already imagining burning olive groves. You're horrified, but you can't look away. Athena snaps back, her spear sparking with divine energy, insisting her gift is for creation, not destruction. You're rooting for her, but you're also noticing how the gods' bickering mirrors the mortal chaos you saw in the village. It's like nobody, divine or human, can handle this oil without making a mess. Let's lighten the mood with a joke. Why did Zeus avoid olive oil? He didn't want to slip up in front of Hera. Okay, back to the drama. You're catching snippets of other gods chiming in. Demeter's cautiously optimistic, thinking olive trees might stabilize farming, while Hermes is already scheming to sell the oil on some divine black market. You're exhausted just listening, and Athena looks like she's one snarky comment away from smiting someone. You can feel her regret starting to simmer, not because the oil's a bad idea, but because everyone's already twisting it into something she didn't intend. You shift your gaze to the mortal world below, where the first olive groves are taking root. You can see torchlight flickering in the distance, villagers still buzzing about their new obsession. The gods' debate is echoing in your head, and you're starting to wonder how Athena's going to handle the fallout when mortals take her gift to the next level. For now, you're stuck on Olympus, the air heavy with divine egos and the faint, oily scent of trouble. You're tempted to grab a cloud and nap, but the story's pulling you forward, and you know the mortals are about to make things even messier. The gods are winding down their argument, or at least they're distracted by ambrosia and nectar. Athena's alone again, staring out at the mortal world, her expression a mix of pride and dread. You're close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers grip her spear. She's muttering something about teaching them better, and you're not sure if she means the gods or the mortals. Either way, you're hooked, wondering how her grand plan will unravel when the farmers down below start turning her gift into a full-blown industry. The night's growing colder, the stars sharper, and you're ready to follow this slippery slope wherever it leads. You're back in the mortal world now, the divine squabbles of Olympus fading like a dream as your feet hit the dusty soil of an ancient Greek village. The sun's high, scorching your shoulders, and the air's alive with the buzz of cicadas and the chatter of farmers who've caught olive oil fever. You're standing in a patchy olive grove, the trees' gnarled branches heavy with green fruit, and you can't help but feel the energy of a community about to ride Athena's gift to glory, or crash and burn. These farmers, with their calloused hands and sun-creased faces, are tinkering like mad scientists, figuring out how to turn olives into liquid gold. You're along for the ride, and trust me, it's about to get messy. You follow a farmer, let's call her Eleni, through the grove, her tunic dusted with red earth. She's got this determined glint in her eye, like she's personally responsible for making Athena proud. You watch her inspect an olive press, a clunky wooden contraption that looks like it could double as a torture device. She's barking orders at a couple of teenagers who are hauling baskets of olives, their arms slick with sweat and stray oil. You're impressed by the hustle, but you're also noticing the chaos, spilled olives rolling underfoot, a goat chewing on a low branch, and someone's kid smearing oil on a dog for no apparent reason. You're trying not to laugh, but come on, it's like a Greek sitcom. Eleni's not fazed. She's crushing olives with a stone, the oil dribbling into a clay basin, and you can smell it, peppery, earthy, like the promise of a good meal. You're tempted to dip a finger in, but you're distracted by the villagers crowding around, each with their own wild ideas. One guy's insisting the oil cures headaches, another swears it keeps evil spirits away. You're skeptical, but you're also catching their excitement. This oil's not just food, it's magic to them, a gift straight from Athena's divine brainstorming session. You're starting to see why she thought this was a slam dunk, but you're also sensing the trouble brewing. Here's a solid historical fact. By the 6th century BCE, olive oil production was a cornerstone of the Greek economy, with regions like Attica exporting it across the Mediterranean. It wasn't just for cooking. Temples used it in lamps, and athletes slathered it on before competitions. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some ancient farmers believed olive trees grew better if you whispered to them during planting, a ritual tied to myths about Athena's blessings. You're picturing Eleni muttering sweet nothings to her trees, aren't you? It's adorable but also a little unhinged. Historians still argue whether these rituals were just superstition or a way to psych up farmers for the grueling work of olive cultivation. You're leaning toward both, but it's hard to say when you're surrounded by this much enthusiasm. You're still trailing Eleni, who's now teaching her neighbors how to press olives without wasting half the batch. You're noticing how the grove's becoming a hub, with people hauling in their own olives to share the press. It's like a community kitchen, but stickier. You're dodging puddles of oil on the ground, and you're starting to wonder how anyone stays clean around here. One farmer, a wiry guy with a beard like a bird's nest, is experimenting with mixing oil and herbs, claiming it's the future of cooking. You're nodding because yeah, that sounds like a win, but then he pours some on a statue of Athena as an offering and you're like, buddy, maybe don't waste the good stuff. Joke break. Why did the olive press go out of business? It couldn't handle the pressure. Back to the grove. You're catching whispers of bigger plans. Eleni's talking about selling surplus oil at the market, and others are nodding like they're ready to quit barley farming altogether. You're impressed by their ambition, but you're also flashing back to Athena's worried face on Olympus. She didn't sign up for this level of obsession. You're starting to see her gift morph into something she can't control, like a viral TikTok she didn't mean to post. You shift to the edge of the grove, where a few elders are sitting under a tree, sipping watered-down wine and debating the oil's potential. One claims it'll make their village richer than Corinth. Another warns it's a fad that'll fade like last year's obsession with dyed tunics. You're torn, because the oil's clearly a game changer, but you're also noticing the strain, overworked farmers, trampled soil, and a kid who just slipped in an oil slick and face-planted. You're wincing, but the villagers are too busy to care, their eyes gleaming with dreams of wealth and glory. You're about to follow Eleni to the market when you catch a glimpse of something odd. A lone olive tree at the grove's edge, its leaves drooping like it's sulking. You're probably imagining it, but it feels like Athena's watching, her divine presence flickering in the branches. You're wondering if she's proud or already regretting this whole experiment. The farmers don't notice. They're too busy planning their oil empire. You're hooked, though, because this grove's just the start, and you know the markets are about to turn this local craze into a Mediterranean mania. The sun's dipping lower, painting the trees gold, and you're ready to see where this slippery slope leads next. You're leaving the olive grove behind, the scent of crushed fruit still clinging to your senses as you follow the dirt path toward a bustling Greek market. The sun's relentless, baking the earth under your feet, and the air's thick with dust, sweat, and the shouts of traders hawking their wares. You're in the heart of an ancient agora, where Athena's olive oil is about to go from village experiment to Mediterranean superstar. The market's a riot of color, red pottery, green herbs, and the golden gleam of oil in clay jars. You're weaving through the crowd, dodging donkeys and merchants, and you can feel the pulse of commerce like a heartbeat. This is where the oil hits the big time, and you're here for every greasy moment. You spot Eleni from the grove, her arms loaded with amphorae, those tall jars sealed with wax to keep the oil fresh. She's haggling with a trader, her voice sharp but confident, demanding a better price. You're impressed, she's no rookie. The trader, a guy with a sunburned nose and a calculating squint, sniffs the oil and nods like he's just discovered gold. You're close enough to catch the deal. A jar of oil for a stack of bronze tools. You're thinking, not bad, but you're also noticing the crowd gathering, eyes locked on Eleny's jars. Word spread, and Athena's gift is the talk of the market. You wander past stalls piled with figs, fish, and wool, but the oil vendors are stealing the show. You see jars of every size, some painted with olive branch motifs, others plain but brimming with that liquid shimmer. Merchants are shouting about Athena's finest and blessed by the goddess, and you're rolling your eyes at the marketing hype. One guy's even claiming his oil makes you wiser, which, okay, is a stretch, but the crowd's eating it up. You're tempted to grab a loaf of bread and start dipping, but you're too busy watching the chaos unfold. Here's a historical anchor. By the 5th century BCE, olive oil was a major export for Greek city-states, shipped in amphorae as far as Egypt and the Black Sea, fueling trade networks that made places like Athens filthy rich. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some traders mixed olive oil with cheaper oils to stretch profits, a scam so common that Athens passed laws to crack down on it. You're smirking, imagining a merchant getting busted for selling olive oil light. Historians still argue whether these trade booms strengthened city-states or sparked rivalries that led to wars. You're not sure, but you're feeling the market's energy, and it's electric. You're still trailing Eleni, who's now surrounded by buyers, her jars selling faster than she can unpack them. You're noticing how the oil's not just a product, it's a status symbol. A woman in a fine linen dress buys a tiny vial, probably to flaunt at a banquet. A grizzled sailor's haggling for a big jar, muttering about lamp fuel for his ship. You're starting to see Athena's vision come alive, her oils touching every corner of life, from kitchens to temples. But you're also catching the first whiffs of trouble. Two merchants are arguing over who gets Eleny's last jar, and it's getting heated. You're thinking, guys, it's just oil, but to them it's power. Joke time. Why did the olive oil go to market? It wanted to branch out. Okay, back to the agora. You're weaving through the crowd when you spot something odd. A small altar tucked between stalls, with a clay lamp burning olive oil and a tiny olive branch offering. You're touched, imagining Athena smiling from Olympus, but you're also wondering if she's seeing the bigger picture. The market's buzzing with greed, not just gratitude. You overhear a trader bragging about jacking up prices because Athena's gift is in demand. You're cringing, because this isn't the wholesome prosperity Athena had in mind. You pause by a stall where a potter's shaping amphorae, his hands slick with clay and oil. He's chatting with a customer about how oil's changing everything. Farmers are planting more groves, ships are sailing farther, even poets are writing odes to olives. You're impressed by the ripple effect, but you're also noticing the strain. The potter mentions overworked groves and sailors grumbling about risky trade routes. You're starting to feel Athena's regret creeping in, like a shadow over the market's glow. Her gift's a hit, but it's spiraling, and you're not sure she can rein it in. You're about to head back to Eleni when you catch a glimpse of a foreign trader, his accent thick, unloading jars from a cart. He's from somewhere far off, maybe Phoenicia, and he's selling Greek oil back to Greeks at a markup. You're laughing because that's next-level hustle, but you're also seeing how fast this oil craze is spreading. The market's a micro of what's coming: wealth, rivalry, and a whole lot of mess. The sun's dipping low, painting the stalls orange, and you're ready to see how Athena reacts when she realizes her gift's turning into a global obsession. For now, you're stuck in the agora, the air heavy with oil and ambition, and you're hooked on what's next. You're still buzzing from the market's chaos, the shouts of traders and the gleam of oil jars lingering in your mind as you shift to a quieter scene. You're standing on a rocky hill overlooking Athens, the city sprawling below like a patchwork of whitewashed houses and dusty roads. The air's warm, scented with wild sage and the faint, oily tang of olive groves stretching into the distance. It's been a few years since the market mania, and Athena's gift has taken root, literally and figuratively. But you're here to witness the moment her pride starts to curdle into regret. You can almost feel her watching, her divine gaze heavy with doubt, as mortals take her olive oil to places she never imagined. Buckle up because this is where things get slippery. You're following a young merchant named Nikos, his cart creaking under a load of amphorae as he trudges toward a temple. He's got big dreams, turn his family's small grove into a trade empire, but you're noticing his frayed tunic and the worry lines etched into his face. The oil boom's been good to some, but Nikos is stretched thin, borrowing to keep up with demand. You're sympathizing, but you're also catching glimpses of how Athena's gift is warping lives. Nikos mutters about buyers who haggle too hard and groves that can't produce fast enough. You're starting to see cracks in the golden dream Athena sold to mortals. You reach the temple, a modest stone structure dedicated to Athena, its columns draped with olive branches. Nikos is here to offer a jar of his finest oil, a thanks for the goddess's gift. You watch him pour it into a bronze basin, the oil catching the sunlight like liquid fire. The priestess nods approvingly, but you're distracted by a group of worshippers nearby, slathering oil on their arms as part of some ritual. You're raising an eyebrow because, really? This isn't cooking or lamp fuel, it's borderline obsessive. You're starting to feel Athena's unease, like a prickle on your neck. Her gift was supposed to elevate mortals, not turn them into oil fanatics. Here's a historical anchor. Olive oil was so vital in ancient Greece that it was used as a currency in some transactions, with standardized amphorae acting like gold bars in trade hubs like Athens. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Greeks believed olive oil could ward off curses if smeared on doorframes, a superstition that had priests and housewives alike stocking up. You're chuckling, picturing Nikos's neighbors painting their doors with oil like it's magical WD-40. Historians still argue whether this reverence for oil was purely religious or a clever way to justify hoarding a valuable resource. You're leaning toward a bit of both, but it's hard to tell when you're surrounded by this much devotion. You're still at the temple, the air heavy with incense and oil, when you overhear a heated argument. Two farmers are bickering over land. Both want to plant more olive trees, but there's not enough fertile soil to go around. You're wincing as their voices rise, fists clenched, and you're thinking, guys, it's just a tree. But to them, it's survival. You're flashing back to Athena's vision on Olympus, all those lofty dreams of prosperity, and you're seeing how it's twisting into greed and conflict. You're wondering if she's up there now, biting her divine lip, realizing her gifts got a dark side. Joke break. Why did the olive oil go to therapy? It had an identity crisis after being called holy. Okay, back to the temple. You're noticing how the oil's infiltrating every corner of life. A woman's rubbing it into her baby's skin, claiming it's Athena's blessing in liquid form. A merchant's boasting about using it to bribe a city official. You're cringing, because this isn't the wholesome unity Athena imagined. You're starting to feel her regret take shape, like a storm cloud gathering over the city. She wanted to give mortals a tool, not a fetish. You follow Nikos as he leaves the temple, his cart lighter but his mood darker. He's muttering about competitors undercutting his prices and groves failing from overharvesting. You're walking beside him, the road winding through olive trees that look exhausted, their branches sparse from too much picking. You're starting to see the bigger picture. Athena's gift is a runaway train, and mortals are riding it without brakes. You're tempted to whisper, "Slow down, Nikos," but he's too focused, dreaming of the next shipment, the next deal. You pause at a crossroads, the city glowing under the late afternoon sun. You can see ships in the distance, their sails catching the wind as they carry oil to far-off ports. You're impressed by the scale, but you're also uneasy. The oil's tying people together, farmers, traders, priests, but it's also tearing them apart, pitting neighbor against neighbor in a race for profit. You're wondering how Athena's feeling now, her grand plan unraveling like a dropped spool of thread. The air's cooling, the shadows lengthening, and you're ready to see how this obsession plays out in the sacred spaces where oil's becoming more than just a gift, it's a way of life. You're slipping away from the bustling streets of Athens, the merchant's cart and temple offerings fading as you find yourself in a serene olive grove, its trees casting dappled shadows on the earth. The air's cooler here, laced with the scent of dew and olives, and you can hear the soft rustle of leaves mingling with distant chants. You're standing in a sacred space, one of those groves the Greeks dedicated to Athena, where olive oil's not just a commodity but a bridge to the divine. The vibe's peaceful, almost hypnotic, but you're about to see how mortals turn even this holy ground into a sticky mess of rituals and excess. Athena's regret is simmering, and you're close enough to feel its weight. You're trailing a priestess named Talia, her white robes brushing the grass as she prepares for a ritual. She's carrying a clay lamp filled with olive oil, its wick flickering like a tiny star. You're mesmerized by the care she takes, her movements slow and deliberate, like she's channeling Athena herself. The grove's dotted with altars, rough stone slabs draped with olive branches, and you notice other worshippers gathering, their faces lit with reverence. They're here to honor Athena's gift, but you're picking up on something else, a kind of fervor that feels less like devotion and more like obsession. You're wondering if Athena's up on Olympus, watching this and wincing. Talia lights the lamp, and you watch the oil burn, its golden glow casting shadows on the trees. She's chanting, her voice low and rhythmic, asking Athena to bless the harvest. You're caught up in the moment, the air thick with incense and oil, but then things get weird. A worshipper steps forward, pouring an entire jar of oil over an altar, letting it drip onto the ground. You're blinking like, was that necessary? Another smears oil on her face, claiming it's Athena's wisdom sinking into her skin. You're trying not to laugh, but come on, this is next level extra. You're starting to see why Athena's regretting her invention, her sacred gifts turning into a performance art piece. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil was central to Greek religious practices, used in temple lamps, anointings, and offerings, especially in Athena's cults, where it symbolized divine favor. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some priests believed oil from the oldest olive trees, called Morii, in Athens, was sacred enough to heal wounds or curse enemies if used in specific rituals. You're picturing Talia sneaking into the grove at midnight to harvest magic oil, aren't you? It's wild. Historians still argue whether these sacred groves were truly spiritual havens or just propaganda tools to boost Athena's clout in city politics. You're leaning toward a mix of faith and flex, but it's hard to tell when you're surrounded by this much oil-soaked devotion. You're still in the grove, the ritual picking up steam. Talia's now leading a procession, worshippers carrying oil-filled vases and singing hymns about Athena's tree. You're following along, dodging puddles of spilled oil that make the ground slick as ice. One guy slips and nearly takes out an altar, and you're stifling a giggle. Joke break. Why did the olive oil join the choir? It wanted to be a little more anointed. Okay, back to the scene. You're noticing how the ritual's getting messy, literally. People are pouring oil on everything, statues, trees, each other. You're cringing because this isn't the elegant worship Athena probably had in mind. You pause by a massive olive tree, its trunk twisted with age, and you swear it's the same one Athena blessed way back when. You're probably imagining it, but it feels like her presence lingers, heavy with disappointment. You're flashing back to her pacing on Olympus, muttering about mortals mucking things up, and you're seeing it now. The grove's sacred, sure, but it's also a stage for excess, worshippers competing to offer the most oil, like it's a divine popularity contest. You're wondering if Athena's regretting not sticking to simpler gifts, like, say, a nice laurel wreath. You're distracted by a commotion at the grove's edge. Two worshippers are arguing over whose oil offering was purer, and it's getting heated enough that Talia has to step in. You're shaking your head, because even here, in this so-called holy space, Athena's gift is sparking petty drama. You're starting to feel her regret deepen, like a knot in your chest. She wanted to unite mortals, not give them new reasons to bicker. You're tempted to sit under the tree and nap, the chants and oil fumes lulling you, but the story's pulling you forward. You glance at the horizon, where the sun's sinking, painting the grove gold. Beyond the trees, You can see the city's glow and the faint outlines of more groves, more oil, more everything. You're realizing this sacred obsession's just one piece of a bigger puzzle. Athena's gift is reshaping the world, and not always for the better. You're ready to see how it plays out in the wider arenas of war and peace, where oil's about to become more than a ritual prop. For now, you're in the grove, the air warm and heavy, the ground slick beneath your feet, and you're hooked on what's next. You're stepping out of the sacred grove, the chants and oily fumes fading as you find yourself on a windswept plain near the coast, where the tang of salt mixes with the familiar scent of olive oil. The sun's high, glinting off bronze shields and spear tips, and you're in the thick of ancient Greece's messy world of war and diplomacy. Athena's gift, that shimmering olive oil, isn't just for cooking or rituals anymore. It's a player in the high-stakes games of power and peace. You're here to see how it fuels both conflict and compromise, and trust me, it's about to get as slippery as the grove's altar stones. Athena's regret is growing, and you're close enough to feel its sting. You're following a grizzled general named Leonidas. Not that Leonidas, just a guy with a knack for strategy and a permanent scowl. He's overseeing a supply caravan, its carts loaded with amphorae of olive oil, bound for an army camped nearby. You're trudging alongside, the dust coating your throat, and you're noticing how the oil's not just a luxury now, it's a military essential. Soldiers use it to keep their leather armor supple, to fuel torches for night raids, even to dress wounds when supplies run low. You're impressed by the versatility, but you're also catching Leonidas's muttered complaints about the cost. Athena's gift, he grumbles, is bleeding us dry. You're starting to see why she might be second-guessing her big idea. You reach the camp, a sprawl of tents and cook fires, where soldiers are unloading the oil like it's liquid gold. You watch one guy slather it on his arms before wrestling practice, claiming it makes him ungrappable. You're smirking because, sure, buddy, that's the edge you need against a Spartan phalanx. But then you overhear a quartermaster arguing with a merchant over a shipment. Apparently, some of the oil's gone rancid, and the camp's stuck with useless jars. You're wincing, imagining Athena's face if she knew her sacred gift was rotting in a war zone. You're starting to feel her regret sharpen, like a blade against a whetstone. Here's a historical anchor. Olive oil was a logistical lifeline in ancient Greek warfare, used not just for food and fuel but also as a trade good to fund armies, with city-states like Athens leveraging their oil wealth to build navies. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Greek generals offered oil-soaked olive branches as peace tokens during truces, a symbolic nod to Athena's gift that doubled as a flex of their resources. You're chuckling, picturing Leonidas tossing a greasy branch at an enemy like, "Take this and chill." Historians still argue whether these oil-based gestures were genuine diplomacy or just propaganda to mask ulterior motives. You're leaning toward sneaky flex, but it's hard to say when you're surrounded by this much martial hustle. You're still in the camp, dodging soldiers and oil spills, when you catch sight of a different scene, a diplomatic envoy arriving from a rival city-state. They're carrying ornate amphorae, the kind painted with Athena's owl, and you realize the oil's a peace offering, meant to smooth over a border dispute. You're impressed by the symbolism, but you're also noticing the tension. Leonidas's men are eyeing the jars like they'd rather drink the oil than trust the envoy. You're flashing back to the grove's over-the-top rituals, and you're seeing a pattern. Athena's gift keeps getting twisted into something she didn't intend, whether it's war fuel or a diplomatic bribe. Joke break. Why did the olive oil join the army? It wanted to be a slick operator. Back to the plane. You're following the envoy as they meet Leonidas under a makeshift canopy. The oil's presented with fanfare, but you're catching whispers of skepticism. Some soldiers think the rival city's just unloading surplus to weaken Athens's market. You're raising an eyebrow, because that's next-level shady, and you're wondering if Athena's up there, groaning at how her gifts become a pawn in mortal power plays. You're starting to feel her regret like a weight, heavy as the amphorae piling up around you. You wander to the camp's edge, where a scribe's tallying supplies, his wax tablet smudged with oil. He's muttering about how the army's burning through jars faster than the groves can produce. You're seeing the bigger picture now, oil's tying city-states together through trade and treaties, but it's also sparking rivalries, with everyone scrambling to control the best groves. You're tempted to flop onto the grass and nap, the sea breeze lulling you, but the story's pulling you forward. You're wondering how Athena's feeling as her gift fuels both swords and olive branches, never quite delivering the unity she dreamed of. The sun's dipping, painting the camp gold, and you can see ships on the horizon, likely carrying more oil to distant allies or enemies. You're realizing this war and peace game is just one more way mortals are running wild with Athena's invention, and it's not slowing down. You're ready to see how this obsession spills into the absurd world of beauty trends, where oil's about to get even weirder. For now, you're on the plain, the air sharp with salt and oil, the clash of bronze echoing in the distance, and you're hooked on what's next. You're leaving the dusty war camp behind, the clank of bronze and whispers of diplomacy fading as you step into a sunlit courtyard in Athens, where the air's thick with the scent of olive oil and vanity. It's a bustling urban scene, with women in flowing tunics and men in linen chitons gossiping under awnings, their skin gleaming unnaturally. You're here to witness the absurd heights of ancient Greece's olive oil beauty craze, where Athena's gift is slathered, smeared, and practically worshipped as the secret to eternal glow. Her regret's practically palpable now, and you're about to see why. Mortals have taken her practical invention and turned it into a glossy, greasy mess. You're following a young woman named Chloe, her hair pinned with olive wood combs, as she navigates a pop-up beauty stall in the courtyard. The vendor, a smooth-talking guy with oil-slicked hands, is peddling jars of Athena's elixir, claiming it'll erase wrinkles and make you irresistible. You're rolling your eyes because, sure, it's oil, not a love potion, but Chloe's all in, handing over a handful of coins for a tiny vial. You watch her dab it on her cheeks, her face shining like a polished statue, and you're thinking, girl, you're glowing, but also, why? You're starting to feel Athena's cringe from Olympus, her gift reduced to a beauty influencer's must-have. You wander through the courtyard, dodging puddles of spilled oil and overhearing snippets of beauty talk. One woman swearing by oil-soaked linen wraps to detox her skin, another's mixing it with crushed herbs for a DIY face mask. You're cringing at the stickiness, imagining the laundry nightmares, but you're also fascinated. These folks are treating olive oil like it's the key to immortality, and the vendors are cashing in, hawking oil blends with wild claims, stronger hair, brighter eyes, even divine charisma. You're smirking, because this is peak ancient vibes, and Athena's probably face-palming. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil was a staple in ancient Greek grooming, used as a moisturizer, hair conditioner, and even a base for perfumes, with athletes famously oiling up before competitions to look sleek. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Greek women believed rubbing oil into their feet would ward off bad luck, a superstition tied to myths about Athena's tree-grounding divine energy. You're picturing Chloe oiling her soles before a big date, aren't you? It's bizarre but oddly charming. Historians still argue whether these beauty rituals were about aesthetics or a deeper cultural obsession with purity and divine favor. You're leaning toward vanity with a side of spirituality, but it's hard to tell when you're surrounded by this much shine. You're still trailing Chloe, who's now at a bathhouse, where oil's the star of the show. You watch her pour it over her arms before scraping it off with a strigil, a curved metal tool that looks like a torture device but apparently feels amazing. The bathhouse is a haze of steam and oil, with people slathering and scraping like it's an Olympic sport. You're dodging slippery floors, wondering how anyone avoids face planting when you overhear a guy bragging about using oil to sculpt his beard. You're trying not to laugh, but come on, this is beard wax taken to a divine extreme. Joke break. Why did the olive oil start a skincare line? It wanted to branch out into glorious territory. Okay, back to the bathhouse. You're noticing how the oil's not just a beauty product, it's a social flex. The wealthier Athenians are flaunting imported oils from Crete, while others make do with local blends. You're seeing the same greed you caught in the markets, only now it's about who looks the shiniest. You're flashing back to the sacred groves over-the-top rituals, and you're realizing Athena's gift keeps getting hijacked. First for worship, then war, now vanity. You're wondering if she's up there, muttering, "I gave them oil for cooking, not this." Her regrets like a low hum, vibrating through the courtyard's chatter. You pause by a fountain where a group's debating the best oil blends. Some swear by time-infused, others want plain for authenticity. It's getting heated, and you're shaking your head, because even beauty's a battleground now. You're tempted to splash some fountain water and call it a day, the oil fumes lulling you into a sleepy haze, but the story's pulling you forward. You're starting to see the bigger picture. This beauty craze is just one more way mortals are running wild with Athena's gift, and it's about to tip into economic chaos. The sun's dipping, casting long shadows over the courtyard, and you can hear the city winding down, though the oil obsession shows no signs of slowing. You're ready to see how this frenzy crashes, as groves and markets strain under the weight of demand. For now, you're in the courtyard, the air heavy with oil and ambition, your skin feeling suspiciously slick just from being here, and you're hooked on what's next. You're slipping away from the glossy courtyard, the sheen of beauty fads and oily strigils fading as you find yourself on a sun-scorched hillside dotted with olive groves. The air's dry, buzzing with cicadas, and the ground's cracked from too many harvests. You're in the heart of ancient Greece's olive oil boom, but the golden dream's starting to sour. The groves are overworked, the markets are glutted, and Athena's gift is fueling an economic bubble that's about to pop. You're here to witness the fallout, the moment her regret hardens into a bitter knot. The scent of olives is everywhere, but it's tinged with desperation, and you're bracing for the crash. You're trailing a farmer named Demetrios, his hands stained with oil and dirt as he inspects his grove. His trees look exhausted, their leaves drooping, branches bare from relentless picking. He's muttering about yields dropping and debts piling up, his voice rough with worry. You're sympathizing, remembering the early days when farmers like Eleni were buzzing with hope. Now, Demetrios is caught in a trap. Everyone's planted olive trees, flooding the market with oil, and prices are tanking. You're noticing abandoned carts nearby, amphorae left to crack in the sun, and you're thinking, this is not the prosperity Athena envisioned. Her regrets like a shadow, creeping over the hillside. You follow Demetrios to a nearby village, where the mood's grim. The local market's a ghost of its former self, stalls half empty, traders bickering over scraps. You overhear a merchant complaining that he can't sell his oil even at a loss, another's bartering jars for bread just to eat. You're wincing because this is the dark side of the oil craze you saw in the agora. Everyone bet big on Athena's gift, and now they're drowning in it. You're flashing back to the beauty stalls, where oil was a status symbol, and you're seeing how that frenzy fed this oversupply. You're wondering if Athena's up there, watching her grand plan implode. Here's a historical fact. Ancient Greece's olive oil trade was so vital that overproduction in the 5th century BCE caused price crashes in regions like Attica, forcing some farmers into debt or abandonment of groves. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some desperate traders tried diluting oil with water or cheaper fats to stretch supplies, a scam that sparked lawsuits and even public shaming in Athens's courts. You're chuckling, imagining Demetrios side-eyeing a shady vendor with a jar of discount oil. Historians still argue whether these economic slumps were due to poor planning or external pressures like wars disrupting trade routes. You're leaning toward mortals being mortals, but it's hard to say when you're surrounded by this much despair. You're still in the village, dodging broken pottery and sullen faces, when you catch a heated argument. A group of farmers is blaming each other for planting too many trees, their voices rising until a fist fight breaks out. You're backing away because, wow, this oil bubble's got people unhinged. You're thinking of the sacred grove's rituals, where oil was holy, and the war camp's logistics, where it was power. Now it's just a burden. You're feeling Athena's regret like a weight, her gift turning neighbors into enemies. Joke break. Why did the olive oil market crash? It couldn't keep its prices from slipping. Okay, back to the chaos. You wander to the village's edge, where Demetrios is meeting a loan shark, a guy with a smirk and a wax tablet full of debts. You're eavesdropping as Demetrios pleads for more time, offering his grove as collateral. You're gutted because this guy's losing everything to Athena's runaway gift. You're tempted to whisper, "Hang in there," but he's too focused, his eyes hollow with defeat. You're noticing how the landscape's changing, groves left to wither, fields unplanted, families packing up to leave. You're starting to see the ripple effects. Less oil means less trade, fewer jobs, and emptier temples. You pause by a lone olive tree, its trunk scarred from overuse, and you swear it's the same one Athena blessed ages ago. You're probably imagining it, but it feels like her presence lingers, heavy with disappointment. You're wondering if she's regretting not setting limits, like a divine terms of service agreement. You're distracted by a distant shout, another farmer's burning his failed grove in frustration, the smoke curling into the sky. You're shaking your head, because this is what happens when mortals take a goddess's gift and run too far, too fast. The sun's sinking, painting the hillside orange, and you can see the city in the distance, its glow dimmer than before. You're realizing this crash isn't just economic, it's fracturing communities, faith, everything. You're ready to see how Athena tries to fix this mess, because she's not the type to sit back and sulk. For now, you're on the hillside, the air heavy with oil and ash, the ground littered with broken dreams, and you're hooked on what's next. You're stepping away from the smoldering ruins of the olive oil bubble, the scent of ash and desperation lingering as you find yourself back on Mount Olympus, the air cool and sharp with divine tension. The clouds swirl beneath your feet, soft as damp wool, and you're standing outside Athena's temple, where the goddess of wisdom is grappling with the mess her gift has become. You're here to witness her attempt to fix the chaos, overproduced groves, crashing markets, mortals fighting over her oil like it's cursed. Her regret's no longer a flicker, it's a storm, and you're about to see her divine intervention go spectacularly wrong. The marble glints under eternal sunlight, but the vibe's anything but serene. You spot Athena pacing, her spear tapping the floor like a metronome, her owl blinking at you like you're late for a crisis meeting. She's muttering about mortals, those same scrappy Greeks you've been trailing through groves and markets, blaming them for twisting her gift into a nightmare. You're close enough to catch her plan. She's going to send a divine edict, a set of guidelines to regulate olive oil production and use. You're raising an eyebrow because, really? A goddess micromanaging farmers sounds like a recipe for disaster. But Athena's all in, her eyes blazing with that stubborn wisdom that got her into this mess in the first place. You follow her to a celestial overlook, where she summons a shimmering vision of the mortal world, groves, markets, temples, all struggling under the weight of her oil. She waves her hand, and you see her edict take shape, a decree carved into golden tablets, commanding mortals to limit grove planting, standardize oil quality, and, get this, reserve a portion for her temples. You're smirking, because it's like Athena's trying to slap a divine NDA on her own invention. You're flashing back to the village fights and abandoned carts, and you're thinking, good luck getting mortals to follow rules. Her regret's palpable, but so is her determination, and you're hooked on how this plays out. Here's a historical fact. Ancient Greek city-states like Athens did regulate olive oil production, with laws controlling exports and quality to stabilize markets, often under the guise of divine mandates. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some myths claim Athena sent sacred owls to groves as inspectors to ensure farmers followed her will, a story likely spread to scare folks into compliance. You're chuckling, picturing an owl glaring at Demetrios while he prunes his trees. Historians still argue whether these regulations were practical economics or religious power grabs to boost Athena's cult. You're leaning toward both with a side of divine ego, but it's hard to say when you're watching a goddess play cosmic bureaucrat. You're still on Olympus, the air humming with energy, as Athena dispatches her edict via a flock of owls, their wings glinting as they swoop toward the mortal world. You're trailing one owl, your vision shifting to a village square where the golden tablet lands, glowing like a divine PowerPoint slide. The locals gather, wide-eyed, as a priest reads Athena's rules. You're expecting reverence, but instead, you get chaos. Farmers are shouting about divine overreach, merchants are whining about profit losses, and someone's already trying to sell fake Athena-approved oil. You're cringing, because this is worse than the market crash. Joke break: why did Athena's edict fail? It was too slick for mortals to grasp. Hey, back to the square. You're noticing how Athena's fix is backfiring. A farmer's burning the tablet in protest, claiming Athena's abandoned them. A priestess is trying to calm the crowd, but even she looks skeptical, muttering about unrealistic quotas. You're flashing back to the sacred grove's oily rituals, and you're seeing a pattern. Every time Athena tries to control her gift, mortals double down on their chaos. You're feeling her regret like a cold wind, her plan unraveling faster than a dropped scroll. You're tempted to flop onto a cloud and nap, the divine drama exhausting you, but the story's pulling you forward. You shift back to Olympus, where Athena's watching the mortal rebellion through her vision pool, her face a mix of fury and despair. You're close enough to hear her whisper, "I gave them wisdom's fruit, not a free-for-all." You're sympathizing, but you're also thinking she underestimated mortal greed. You're wondering what she'll do next, because this edict's only made things worse. Groves are still failing, markets are still a mess, and now her temples are losing followers. You're starting to see her gift as a Pandora's jar of its own, spilling trouble she can't contain. The eternal sun's dipping, casting long shadows over the temple, and you can feel the weight of Athena's failure settling in. You're ready to see how this oil obsession spirals further, infecting art, myths, and every corner of Greek life. For now, you're on Olympus, the air heavy with divine frustration, the mortal world below a flickering mess of oil and defiance, and you're hooked on what's next. You're descending from the tense heights of Olympus, the sting of Athena's failed edict still fresh as you land in the heart of ancient Athens, where the air hums with creativity and obsession. The sun's warm, glinting off marble statues and painted pottery, and you're surrounded by the vibrant pulse of a city gripped by olive oil mania. You're here to see how Athena's gift has woven itself into art, myths, and daily life, turning from a practical tool into a cultural juggernaut. Her regret's a constant undercurrent now, and you're about to witness why. Mortals aren't just using her oil, they're worshipping it in ways that make her divine head spin. The streets buzz with energy, and you're diving into the chaos. You're following an artist named Lysippos, his hands smudged with clay as he shapes a vase in a cramped workshop. The walls are lined with amphorae, each painted with olive trees, Athena's owl, or scenes of oil presses at work. You're impressed by the detail, the way he captures the shimmer of oil in black figure glaze, but you're also noticing how every piece screams, olive oil is life. Lysippos is muttering about a big commission for a festival, where his vases will hold Athena's sacred oil for prizes. You're thinking, cool gig, but you're also catching the frenzy in his eyes, like he's less an artist and more a prophet of the oil cult. You're starting to feel Athena's unease, her gift hijacked by this cultural obsession. You step outside, weaving through Athens' agora, where oil's fingerprints are everywhere. Poets are reciting odes to olive groves, their words dripping with metaphors about liquid wisdom. You overhear a street performer spinning a myth about Athena weeping oil tears to bless the earth, total fan fiction, but the crowd's eating it up. You're smirking, because this is like ancient Greece's version of viral content, and oil's the star. Even kids are playing with olive pits, carving them into tiny charms. You're flashing back to the beauty fads and market crashes, and you're seeing how oil's not just a product anymore, it's the heartbeat of Greek identity. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil was a recurring motif in ancient Greek art, with vases and frescoes from the 6th century BC depicting harvests and offerings, often tied to Athena's cult in Athens. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some poets claimed olive oil was Athena's divine sweat, a metaphor so popular it was etched on temple offerings, making priests blush. You're chuckling, picturing Lysippos painting goddess sweat on a vase for clout. Historians still argue whether this cultural obsession was a genuine love for Athena's gift or a way to justify economic dependence on oil. You're leaning toward both with a dash of hype, but it's hard to tell when you're surrounded by this much fervor. You're back in the workshop, where Lysippos is now sketching a mural for a wealthy patron. A scene of Athena gifting the olive tree, her face serene but the mortals around her practically bathing in oil. You're cringing because this is the kind of exaggeration that's driving Athena nuts. You're imagining her on Olympus, muttering, "I gave them a tree, not a lifestyle brand." Her regrets like a low hum, vibrating through the clay dust and paint fumes. You're noticing how even daily life's saturated with oil. Housewives are swapping recipes for oil-soaked bread, philosophers are debating its essence in the agora, and kids are doodling olive branches on walls. It's everywhere, and it's overwhelming. Joke break. Why did the olive oil inspire poets? It was too slick to ignore. Okay, back to Athens. You're wandering to a theater, where a play's about to start, and, surprise, it's about Athena's olive tree saving a village. The actors are slathering oil on their costumes for authenticity, and you're trying not to laugh as one slips mid-monologue. You're seeing how oil's not just art or myth, it's a performance, a way to signal devotion to Athena while flexing cultural clout. You're wondering if she's watching, her divine patience fraying as her gift becomes a caricature. You pause by a temple, where a festival's in full swing, oil flowing like water. Vases are awarded, lamps are lit, and dancers are, rubbing oil on their arms for divine grace. You're shaking your head, because this is the sacred grove's rituals on steroids, and it's not what Athena intended. You're feeling her regret deepen, like a crack in the marble beneath your feet. You're tempted to sit on a bench and nap, the festival's music lulling you, but the story's pulling you forward. You're starting to see how this cultural craze is ripe for sabotage, especially by rival gods who'd love to see Athena's legacy slip. The sun's dipping, casting golden light over the city, and you can hear the hum of life oil in every song, every brushstroke, every prayer. You're ready to see how Poseidon and others stir trouble, because this obsession's too big to go unchallenged. For now, you're in Athens, the air heavy with oil and adoration, the streets alive with a love Athena can't control, and you're hooked on what's next. You're slipping away from Athens' oil-drenched festival, the echoes of poets and painted vases fading as you find yourself on a stormy cliff overlooking the Aegean Sea. The wind howls, salty and sharp, and you're caught in the divine drama of Mount Olympus spilling into the mortal world. Athena's olive oil empire is at its peak, but rival gods, led by a certain trident-wielding grump, are ready to rain on her parade. You're here to witness Poseidon and his crew sabotaging her legacy, turning her gift into a battleground. Her regrets are roaring tide now, and you're close enough to feel its pull. The waves crash below, and you're bracing for trouble. You're perched near a coastal village, where fishermen are hauling nets under a darkening sky. You spot Poseidon's influence immediately, a sudden squall churning the sea, rocking ships loaded with olive oil amphorae. You're squinting through the spray, watching a merchant's vessel list dangerously, its cargo of Athena's liquid gold spilling into the waves. The sailors are cursing, blaming Athena for their bad luck, and you're wincing because ouch, that's a low blow. You're flashing back to Poseidon's smirk on Olympus, when he mocked her oil as greasy fruit juice, and you're realizing he's not just jealous, he's out for revenge. You're feeling Athena's regret like a cold wave, her gift sinking with those jars. You shift to the village, where the storm's aftermath is grim. Shattered amphorae litter the shore, oil mixing with seaweed in useless globs. You're following a trader named Kiros, his face etched with despair as he salvages what he can. He's muttering about Poseidon's wrath, claiming the sea gods punishing them for worshipping Athena's tree over his waves. You're raising an eyebrow because, wow, divine sibling rivalry is hitting mortals hard. You're noticing other signs of sabotage. Groves near the coast are wilting, their roots drowned by unnaturally high tides. You're thinking, Poseidon, that's petty, but you're also seeing how effective it is. Athena's legacy is taking a beating. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil trade routes across the Mediterranean were often disrupted by storms and piracy in the 5th century BCE, with coastal cities like Athens losing fortunes when shipments sank. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some Greek sailors poured olive oil on stormy seas, believing it calmed waves, a ritual tied to myths about appeasing Poseidon with Athena's gift. You're chuckling, picturing heroes tossing oil overboard like it's a divine bribe. Historians still argue whether these rituals were desperate superstition or a symbolic truce between Athena's and Poseidon's cults. You're leaning toward desperate, but it's hard to say when you're surrounded by this much wreckage. You're still in the village, dodging oil-slicked rocks, when you overhear a heated debate. A priest of Poseidon's temple is rallying locals, claiming Athena's oil has angered the sea god, bringing storms and bad harvests. You're shaking your head because this is straight-up propaganda, but the crowd's buying it. Some are even vowing to burn their olive trees. You're flashing back to Athena's failed edict, when mortals rebelled against her rules, and you're seeing a pattern. Her gift keeps sparking division, and now Poseidon's fanning the flames. You're feeling her regret like a knot, her legacy twisted by divine sabotage and mortal gullibility. Joke break. Why did Poseidon hate olive oil? It kept stealing his liquid spotlight. Okay, back to the chaos. You're noticing other gods piling on. You catch whispers of Dionysus flooding markets with cheap wine to undercut oil sales, and Ares stirring border skirmishes to disrupt trade routes. You're thinking, Athena can't catch a break, and you're right, she's up on Olympus, watching her rivals dismantle her gift. You're tempted to wave at her like, hang in there, but you're too busy dodging a fisherman chucking an amphora at a Poseidon shrine in frustration. You pause by a cliff, where a lone olive tree clings to the edge, its roots battered by waves. You swear it's the same tree Athena blessed, now caught in her rival's crosshairs. You're probably imagining it, but it feels like her presence flickers, heavy with exhaustion. You're wondering if she'll fight back or let her gift drown in this divine turf war. You're distracted by Keros, who's now praying to both Athena and Poseidon, hedging his bets with a vial of oil and a fish offering. You're smirking, because mortals are nothing if not adaptable, but you're also seeing how Athena's losing ground. The storm's clearing, the sea glinting under a weak sun, and you can see wrecked ships dotting the horizon. You're realizing this sabotage isn't just about oil, it's about power, faith, and Athena's place in the pantheon. You're ready to see the darker side of her gift's legacy, where labor and land pay the price for this divine drama. For now, you're on the cliff, the air heavy with salt and oil, the village below a mess of blame and broken jars, and you're hooked on what's next. You're stepping away from the storm-battered coast, the wreckage of oil-soaked ships and Poseidon's sabotage fading as you find yourself in a sun-scorched valley, where olive groves stretch like a weary army. The air's heavy with dust and the faint rot of overworked soil, and you're surrounded by the grinding labor that fuels Athena's olive oil empire. You're here to uncover the dark side of her gift, the toll it's taking on workers, land, and the very mortals she meant to uplift. Her regret's a deep ache now, and you're close enough to feel its weight as you witness the human and environmental cost of her runaway invention. The cicadas drone, and you're diving into the grit. You're following a laborer named Myron, his back bent under a basket of olives, his skin cracked from endless days in the sun. He's part of a crew toiling in a massive grove owned by a wealthy Athenian, the kind who sells oil to far-off ports while Myron scrapes by. You're trudging alongside, the ground uneven with roots and spilled fruit, and you're noticing the exhaustion in his eyes. The oil boom's made some rich, but for workers like Myron, it's a grind, long hours, meager pay, and groves that demand more than the land can give. You're flashing back to the market's frenzy and the festival's excess, and you're seeing how it's built on backs like his. You're thinking, Athena, this isn't the dream you sold. You pause at the grove's edge, where women and children are sorting olives, their hands stained and sore. You overhear Myron muttering about the soil turning to dust, the trees yielding less each year. You're looking around, and it's grim, barren patches where groves have died, streams muddied from erosion, and air thick with the stench of rotting olives left unharvested. You're wincing, because this is what happens when mortals push Athena's gift past its limits. You're feeling her regret like a stone in your chest, her vision of prosperity crumbling under the weight of greed and overwork. Here's a historical fact. Olive cultivation in ancient Greece was labor-intensive, often relying on seasonal workers and slaves, with large estates in regions like Attica driving economic inequality by the 5th century BC. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some workers believed olive trees could curse those who overharvested, a superstition that led to rituals where they'd apologize to trees with oil offerings. You're chuckling, picturing Myron whispering, "Sorry," to a tree while his boss counts profits. Historians still argue whether these environmental strains were due to poor land management or the inevitable cost of oil's economic dominance. You're leaning toward mortals cutting corners, but it's hard to say when you're surrounded by this much depletion. You're still in the grove, dodging fallen branches, when you catch a tense scene. Myron's arguing with an overseer, demanding a break after a 12-hour shift. The overseer, a guy with a whip and zero chill, laughs it off, saying, "Athena's gift waits for no one." You're fuming, because this is the ugly truth behind the oil's shine. Workers pushed to breaking, land stripped bare, all for jars that end up in temples or bathhouses. You're flashing back to Poseidon's storms, and you're realizing the god's sabotage is just one piece of a bigger mess. Athena's gift is eating itself, and mortals are paying the price. Joke break. Why did the olive tree quit the grove? It was tired of being pressed. Okay, back to the valley. You're noticing how the workers cope. Some sing to keep their spirits up, others sneak sips of low-grade oil for energy. You're touched by their resilience, but you're also gutted, because Athena's gift was supposed to lift them up, not grind them down. You're wondering if she's watching from Olympus, her spear clenched as she sees her legacy tarnish. You're tempted to sit on a rock and nap, the drone of labor lulling you, but the story's pulling you forward. You wander to a nearby village, where families like Myron's live in cramped huts, their lives tied to the groves. You overhear talk of illness, skin rashes from oil exposure, lungs clogged from dust, and you're seeing how the oil's reach is relentless. Kids are skipping play to help harvest, and elders are warning about angry earth that won't yield anymore. You're shaking your head, because this is the cost of the cultural craze you saw in Athens, the art and myths glorifying a gift that's breaking people and places. The sun's sinking, casting long shadows over the valley, and you can see the groves fading into dusk, their outlines jagged from overuse. You're realizing this isn't just about oil, it's about what happens when a divine idea outgrows its purpose. You're ready to see Athena face the full scope of her creation's fallout, because she can't ignore this forever. For now, you're in the valley, the air heavy with toil and decay, the ground scarred beneath your feet, and you're hooked on what's next. You're leaving the weary valley behind, the groans of overworked groves and laborers fading as you ascend once more to Mount Olympus, where the air's crisp and charged with divine reckoning. The clouds shimmer like spun silver beneath your feet, and you're standing before Athena's temple, its marble glowing faintly under an eternal dusk. You're here to witness her final confrontation with the legacy of her olive oil, a gift that spiraled from hope to chaos, touching every corner of the mortal world with its greasy fingers. Her regret's a tidal wave now, and you're close enough to feel its crash as she grapples with what she's unleashed. The silence is heavy, and you're bracing for her moment of truth. You spot Athena alone, her spear propped against a column, her owl perched silently as if sensing the gravity. She's not pacing this time, just standing, gazing into a shimmering pool that reflects the mortal world, groves dying, markets collapsing, workers breaking, and her sacred oil fueling rivalries both human and divine. You're close enough to see the strain in her eyes, the goddess of wisdom humbled by her own creation. She's muttering, "I gave them a spark, not a firestorm," and you're nodding because you've seen the fallout, from the village fights to Poseidon's storms. You're wondering if she'll try to fix it again or finally let go. You're drawn to the pool, where images flicker. A farmer like Myron abandoning his grove, a priestess pouring oil in vain, a poet still singing of Athena's gift while the crowd ignores him. You're feeling the weight of her miscalculation. Her oil was meant to unite, to nourish, but it's fractured everything. She steps closer, her voice low, and you catch her wrestling with her role. "Was it my vision or their greed?" she asks, and you're struck by the question. You're flashing back to the early days, when she blessed that first olive tree, all hope and hubris, and you're seeing how it's led to this. Her regrets like a pulse, steady and unrelenting. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil's dominance in ancient Greece shaped its economy and culture for centuries, but by the 4th century BCE, over-reliance led to soil depletion and trade imbalances, forcing cities like Athens to diversify. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some myths claim Athena wept when she saw her groves fail, her tears turning barren soil fertile again, a story farmers told to explain rare recoveries. You're smiling, picturing Athena as a cosmic gardener, but you're also skeptical. Historians still argue whether these myths were hopeful folklore or propaganda to keep faith in Athena's cult alive. You're leaning toward hopeful spin, but it's hard to say when you're standing in her temple, watching her face the wreckage. You're leaving the weary valley behind, the groans of overworked groves and laborers fading as you ascend once more to Mount Olympus, where the air's crisp and charged with divine reckoning. The clouds shimmer like spun silver beneath your feet, and you're standing before Athena's temple, its marble glowing faintly under an eternal dusk. You're here to witness her final confrontation with the legacy of her olive oil, a gift that spiraled from hope to chaos, touching every corner of the mortal world with its greasy fingers. Her regrets a tidal wave now, and you're close enough to feel its crash as she grapples with what she's unleashed. The silence is heavy, and you're bracing for her moment of truth. You spot Athena alone, her spear propped against a column, her owl perched silently as if sensing the gravity. She's not pacing this time, just standing, gazing into a shimmering pool that reflects the mortal world, groves dying, markets collapsing, workers breaking, and her sacred oil fueling rivalries both human and divine. You're close enough to see the strain in her eyes, the goddess of wisdom humbled by her own creation. She's muttering, "I gave them a spark, not a firestorm," and you're nodding because you've seen the fallout, from the village fights to Poseidon's storms. You're wondering if she'll try to fix it again or finally let go. You're drawn to the pool, where images flicker. A farmer like Myron abandoning his grove, a priestess pouring oil in vain, a poet still singing of Athena's gift while the crowd ignores him. You're feeling the weight of her miscalculation. Her oil was meant to unite, to nourish, but it's fractured everything. She steps closer, her voice low, and you catch her wrestling with her role. "Was it my vision or their greed?" she asks, and you're struck by the question. You're flashing back to the early days, when she blessed that first olive tree, all hope and hubris, and you're seeing how it's led to this. Her regrets like a pulse, steady and unrelenting. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil's dominance in ancient Greece shaped its economy and culture for centuries, but by the 4th century BCE, over-reliance led to soil depletion and trade imbalances, forcing cities like Athens to diversify. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some myths claim Athena wept when she saw her groves fail, her tears turning barren soil fertile again, a story farmers told to explain rare recoveries. You're smiling, picturing Athena as a cosmic gardener, but you're also skeptical. Historians still argue whether these myths were hopeful folklore or propaganda to keep faith in Athena's cult alive. You're leaning toward hopeful spin, but it's hard to say when you're standing in her temple, watching her face the wreckage. You're drifting down from the solemn heights of Olympus, Athena's quiet reckoning fading as you settle into a soft, twilight haze, somewhere between the ancient world and a dream. The air's warm, scented with faint traces of olive and earth, and you're standing under a single weathered olive tree, its silver leaves whispering in a gentle breeze. You're here to trace the final threads of Athena's olive oil legacy, how it lingers in the modern world like a half-remembered myth. Her regret's still there, a soft echo, but you're about to see how her gift endures, flawed but enduring as the story winds down to lull you into sleep. The stars are emerging, and you're ready to let this journey fade. You're imagining a modern Mediterranean village, not so different from the ones you've wandered through, whitewashed houses, dusty roads, and groves that still bear Athena's mark. You see farmers tending olive trees, their methods high-tech but their reverence familiar, pressing oil with machines instead of stones. You're smiling because even now, olive oils in kitchens, on tables, in rituals, a quiet nod to Athena's spark. You're thinking of the markets, the wars, the beauty fads, and how they've softened into this. A staple, not a frenzy. You're feeling her regret ease, like a sigh, as her gift finds a humbler place. You wander through this imagined village, the evening air cooling your skin. You picture a family drizzling oil over bread, laughing around a table, and you're reminded of Eleny's early experiments, when oil was new and full of promise. You see a chef in a city restaurant, praising extra virgin, like it's Athena's own recipe, and you're chuckling, recalling the sacred grove's oily excesses. You're noticing how oil's still cultural. Artisans craft olive wood, poets mention groves in passing, but it's no longer a wildfire. You're sensing Athena watching, her spear at rest, maybe even a faint smile as mortals use her gift without breaking the world. Here's a historical fact. Olive oil remains a cornerstone of Mediterranean economies, with Greece producing over 200,000 tons annually, though global trade has diluted its ancient mystique. But here's a quirky tidbit. Some modern Greek festivals still honor Athena with olive oil offerings, pouring it on altars like it's 500 BC, a tradition that's more nostalgia than faith. You're picturing a priestess like Talia, now in jeans, keeping the old ways alive. Historians still argue whether olive oil's enduring role is due to practical utility or a cultural memory of divine gifts. You're leaning toward both with a drizzle of sentiment, but it's hard to say when you're sinking into this twilight calm. You're still under the tree, the breeze softer now, carrying faint echoes of the chaos you've seen, Poseidon's storms, Myron's toil, Lysippos' vases. You're realizing Athena's gift was never perfect, but it shaped a world for better and worse. You're tempted to lie down, the grass cool and inviting, and let the story carry you to sleep. You're imagining oil in your own life, maybe a bottle in your kitchen, a recipe from a grandparent, and you're feeling connected to this ancient thread, however faint. You're hearing Athena's voice, a whisper, they made it theirs. Her regret's there, but so is acceptance, and you're ready to let go. Now, let the world soften, the edges blurring as you sink deeper into the quiet. Picture that olive tree, its branches swaying, each leaf a memory of Athena's gift, her hope, her missteps, her enduring mark. Feel the breeze, gentle as a lullaby, carrying away the weight of markets and storms. You're safe here, under a sky dusted with stars, the scent of olives fading into something warmer, like a blanket woven from dusk. Let the story dissolve, each scene, Eleny's grove, Chloe's shine, Myron's struggle, melting into a single, soothing hum. There's no rush, no chaos, just the slow rhythm of your breath, matching the tree's whisper. You're drifting, the world growing distant, and it's okay to close your eyes. Athena's watching, her owl blinking softly, guarding your rest. Sleep's calling, warm and deep, and you're already there, wrapped in the glow of a story that's done its work. Sweet dreams.